Yes, we went across the Atlantic from Halifax, Nova Scotia to Liverpool, and were billeted in Bournemouth for a couple of weeks or a few weeks, and then we were posted to a flying station, an advanced flying unit. The main purpose here was to try and acclimatise ourselves to the English flying conditions, which were totally different from Australia. We're again flying the Airspeed Oxford, on which I'd gotten my wings at Point Cook, and I can still remember one of the instructors saying, you know, how we're going to find the conditions so different, and he said, "I'll make a bet with you that I could take any of you fellows up under the hood, that is blindfolded, fly you around for 10 minutes, take the blindfold off, and you'll be lost." He said, "I'll have a bet. Anybody take me on?" Nobody took him on, which was just as well, because he was absolutely right. The conditions were so different. It took quite a bit of acclimatisation, and it was a good thing that we were on the Airspeed Oxford, which we'd gotten to know the feel of. After that was at a place called Greenham Common, which is in Berkshire. Later on it became a very controversial drone, because during the Cold War the Americans took it over and developed it as a nuclear base, and there were some very, very nasty demonstrations there at once, post-World War II we're talking, of course. No, we finished at Greenham Common on the Oxfords, and from there we were posted to a place called Abingdon in Oxfordshire. Nice airfield. It was a permanent Air Force RAF establishment, and actually quite comfortable, good facilities and amenities. And there we were flying the twin-engine Whitley, which was a heavy, old, underpowered aircraft, heavy on the controls, slow to react. You'd press a stick hard left and it'd start a left-hand turn about 5 minutes later, or that's what it seemed like anyway, incredibly slow to react. But quite a good aircraft for training purposes, and that of course was where we crewed up, about 40 or 50 blokes, all virtually tossed into a hangar together, and the chief flying instructor suggested, you know, try and sort yourself out, talk to someone, see if you think it's you're compatible to fly together. And skill and training was one thing. Compatibility, particularly in a bomber crew, compatibility was a most important factor. And I got together with a fellow named Pat, an Irishman, a navigator, quite competent he turned out to be, but also pretty wild. As I say, he's an Irishman. He'd been a mercenary in the Spanish Civil War. And, you know, why not? In Ireland, the unemployment during the Depression and immediately after was incredible, the percentage of unemployed. And so if he went over to Spain, at least he'd get clothing, he'd get a feed, he'd get a bed, and a very nominal sort of a pay. So that was Pat's background, but he was a nice guy. And we decided we'd give it a go together. And okay, so we better get a bomb aimer, and there was a Kiwi bloke sort of standing on his own, so we went over and spoke with him, and the next thing, okay, we've got a skipper and a navigator and a bomb aimer. and it so turned out the Kiwi bomb aimer was a very handy man in that he'd left New Zealand, gone to Canada to train as a pilot, but didn't make the grade. He was scrubbed as a pilot, but did very, very well in his navigation and bomb aiming. So we had a bit of a win there in that taking off in the Halifax and landing. As skipper, you needed, as pilot, you needed some assistance. And Maury, the Kiwi, having trained, got in a reasonable way through his pilot trainee course before he was scrubbed. He had bits of knowledge which the average bomb aimer wouldn't have had, and it was very vital to have someone who could assist you, because you were pretty busy at takeoff and landing. So there we were, a threesome. So we're hunting in packs now, three of us, and there's a guy there, he wired us up, and we had a bit of a chat. And he was from Cheshire, and was often called Cheese, nicknamed Cheese after that. And he became our wireless op, very confident. And so we're a pack of four now, and needing a tail gunner, because you only had 5 crew on the Whitleys. And there was a guy from, an Englishman from Brighton down the south coast, Charles Mears, and we grabbed him as our tail gunner. And we were travelling along as a crew. We'd done a little bit of flying together, lots of lectures, a little bit of flying together as a crew. And Pat got pneumonia, which was quite a serious blow, because we'd, melding together very nicely. But the losses in main Bomber Command were such that it had an insatiable appetite for crews, and to wait for Pat to get out of hospital and rejoin us just was not going to happen. So the chief flying instructor came along and said what basically I've just said, we can't wait, you've got to get to, there's another guy here that's available who's been split up from his crew. Would you like to take a trial with him? Well, it really wasn't a matter of would you like, it was basically an order, you better give it a try. And initial engagement with this replacement substitute navigator was pretty frigid. Wally Hammond was his name. His name was Philip, but from day one he was Wally, after the pre-war English opening batsman Walter Hammond. So Wally was quite the opposite from Pat. He was 10 years my senior, actually. He was 32 years old. He just got into aircrew. He was about 6'2", bald as a badger, and a very big nose. I know I've got a big conch, but he'd made mine look as though I came from Lilliput. And as I say, he'd been a banker before the war, was quite a different personality, no comparison between him and Pat. But anyway, there wasn't much option but to give it a go, and Wally turned out to be very, very competent. He, as I say, was 10 years older than me, 12 years older than both the gunners, and as such this could prove from time to time to be a nice steadying influence, a nice mixture of age. Wally and I became very close friends. He used to take me to his mother and sister lived down in Exmouth in Devon, and I would go down there and stay on leave, and we corresponded for many years after I got home from World War II. So there was a substitute navigator there, and the wireless op that we'd selected, Britch, was a bit of a problem. He either didn't have a watch or he couldn't tell the time. He would turn up late for everything. And when I say late, I don't mean a couple of minutes late, very late. And this was a real hiccup because a lot of the exercises, the training exercises and that, could not be commenced without the complete crew. And of course I, as skipper, was getting the kick in the pants all the time. Where's your crew, McDonald? Why haven't you got all your crew here? This was a cause for concern because I couldn't help thinking of the reliability, or more correctly, unreliability factor. If we can't rely on him to come to a lecture on time, I wonder what his reliability factor is going to be like if you get in a pressure situation when the chips are down. Anyway, I talked this over with the rest of the crew, and it was decided that I would go and make my concerns known to the chief flying instructor, and which I did. He gave me a good hearing and said, look, I reckon you've done the right thing, but we have got another wireless op who got separated from his crew due to illness. What about if you give him a go? And I said, oh yeah, anything and is better than what we're concerned about with Britch. And so we took this other wipe on board, Ernie Williams, and he turned out to be a trump. So while we had a different navigator through no fault of our own, we also had a different wireless op from the original by our own choice. And it's interesting, the Bomber Command had an absolutely insatiable appetite for replacement crews. However, when it came to the chips being down, as skipper, you basically had the right of hire and fire. And I will never forget Britch. What he called me is not repeatable when I told him, that he was no longer required with our crew. But it was all entirely of his own making. He just wouldn't take a warning about being late. And it was done by consensus of the crew. It wasn't just my decision, it was the whole crew 100% behind me. And that was, we became, I'd suggest, a very strongly disciplined crew. And while lots of things had to be done according to the book, the instruction manual, etc., there were other little bylaws and things which you could make applicable to your crew. And we did everything by consensus. If somebody thought that we might be able to improve or do something better, we would talk it over as a crew, and if it was agreed, that was the new law from that point on.